Welcome to The Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Hello, and welcome indeed. We are coming to you again, and as always, from tropical Middletown, Connecticut, birthplace of Ernie Wiffle, who you might recognize from the name is the inventor of the world-famous wiffle ball. I can't believe I said that with a straight face. Anyway, I am happier than you might imagine that I have Allie and Dennis Pitocco with me today. I would actually be quite delighted to have them on any day, but they're here today to talk about the pilgrimage they took on the Camino de Santiago. And I have their book here, which I'm going to plug shamelessly, Rites of Passage. And you can see it's all marked up here. So we're definitely going to get into it a little bit. But first, I would like to welcome you both, Allie and Dennis. Thank you for being here. And are there any things in general you would just like to share about the Camino, about your experience, any such things?
I'll take a crack at that, then I'll turn it over to my lovely wife. Mark, I've said this to many people in different.
I just want you to know, Dennis, I'm sorry to interrupt you. That was going to be the last easy question.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad I grabbed it.
Okay.
I've said this to so many people when they ask a question about the experience, and I mean it when I say it was the single most transformational experience of a lifetime. It's just hard to capture it in words, and as you know, and you and I have debated this a long time, when I always say, well, I'm not a writer. Well, when we came back, people were clamoring to say what it was like, and so I wrote an article with maybe 1,000 words. But it became clear to me when just writing that article, you just couldn't capture that. You got to do more than that. So selfishly, that's why we wrote the book. It was for us kind of as a legacy, so we could go back and remind ourselves of the experience and kind of hold on to it. Because as you've heard me say, probably the real Camino begins when you get back, not when you're there. And it's the wisdom you gain. And the second reason we wrote it is for those people that wanted to see it through the eyes of somebody who had actually done it. They didn't want a travelogue. They wanted a story. And so, that's my backstory on this whole thing.
And Allie, if I understand this correctly, the two of you had actually attempted to do this once before. And I think the story is that Dennis brought the wrong shoes.
Well, we'll go with that. We did. We did indeed do 200 of the 500 miles of the Camino Frances before, just because we were interested in it. We didn't know much about it, and a friend of ours was walking, and so we decided we would try it. And indeed, Dennis did not have the correct shoes, so we had some adventures.
Well, given the fact that you completed it this time, that tells me that Dennis is coachable.
Yes, he takes direction well.
I need to give you the Republican response here. I had the right shoes, just the wrong feet.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, good.
You know, sorry, this is a tangent, but I knew a guy that worked for a local gas company here, and his name was Scott. He pronounced it Scott Ruff, but it was spelled R-U-P-F-F. And I could never figure out if it was the first F or the second F that was silent. Still don't know. All right. This is something that I didn't think I was going to get into until later in the conversation, but I want to do it now, given what you just said, Dennis, about coming back. I remember saying to you one day, it might have been it might have been a conversation just between the two of us. I don't
Yeah.
remember. But I said to you, there's one particular thing I would like to ask you about the Camino and your journey. So maybe we should get you on the show to talk about it. And this is it. And I don't know if these are in any way comparable, but I was thinking, especially as I was reading the book and you were getting on the plane to come back. This may sound silly, but at the end of the day on Fridays, I'm always disoriented because my weeks are typically patterned, and I'm typically very, very engrossed in what I'm doing. And then when that's over, it's disorienting for quite a while. Was there anything like that when you realized this had been your pattern for what, 40 days?
Oh boy, that's
Something like that. And then you have all that, different kind of stimulation, all that distancing from your normal lives. And then it's over. I mean, what was that like?
Wow. Gee, obviously you're asking my wife that question.
Well, yeah, that was a curveball.
Well, actually, it is a great question, and it's a really common theme among everybody who walks the Camino, whether they walk 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 10 days. Everybody has the post-Camino transition to deal with.
Perfect.
And there is a lot of discussion and a lot of very open discussion in forums and whatever social media channels people use about how you make the transition. What do people find that works? And everybody's transition is different. We're all coming back to a different life. We've got different ways of dealing with things. But in my experience, and as far as I understand it, nobody just comes back and slides straight back into their normal life like nothing ever happened.
Mm-mm.
Because it's so different. And we live in a world of instant gratification, and the Camino does not buy into that theory. You will slow down, you will take your time, you will get things when they come to you.
Ooh.
And it's a great lesson. But it is difficult when you get back to try and put yourself back there. I don't need this in the next 5 minutes, because I managed fine for 6 weeks. Everything was great. The pace of life slowed down. I had more time to consider things. And so it is a transition. And I think you have to be really mindful about how you do it.
Did you find when you came back and were, I was going to say easing into it. I don't know if there's any easing into it, but resuming what your lives had been before you went, were there things that you found annoying that you hadn't considered to be annoying before?
Yes. Yes.
The floor recognizes Dennis.
Thank you. Mark, you, again, in other forums, you may have heard me say this. The one thing that I discovered and I enjoyed the most during the Camino was what eventually, in fact, we called it this in the book, the Symphony of Silence. It's the ability we both had. And a lot of people, when they hear you go to the Camino, they think you went with a group. I guess a lot of groups walk it, but it was just the two of us. And it was intentionally just the two of us because we wanted to make it our own. But you discover this hours and hours of walking among nature, walking up in the vineyards, your nature at its best. It's just occasionally some animals, some birds, flowers, you name it, things that you don't normally pay much attention to. And it was the silence that was the magic. And this kind of goes to after the Camino and during the Camino, and Allie knows this, we'd be walking along and it would be just pure silence. And then suddenly you hear people coming. And I hate to say it, the word annoying isn't right, but I'm going to use that word. It was annoying. I didn't want anybody to interrupt our silence. So we got in the habit of if we're walking and we can feel they're kind of getting close in the back, or maybe they're doing things that just don't fit the Camino, like they're on their phone. But we would stop and, we'd be adjusting our shoes or something and let them go by. And then there was a safe distance, we'd walk again. But then you come back into the world we live in today with all the noise. You can't get away from it. So ultra sensitive to preserving that quiet or that symphony of silence, which is almost impossible to do, as we all know, when you're back in the real world, as we call it. But boy, there was a raised awareness of the magic of silence.
Yeah, I don't know if I should say philosophically speaking or existentially speaking. Does it make you wonder when you come back why we put up with all that distraction
Oh boy.
and all that noise?
Yeah, part of it, I think, is the typical FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And then, the other word that maybe we've reinvented it, but we're using the word JOMO now, which is the joy of missing out.
Oh, interesting.
Just a complete reversal of that. But those kind of things wouldn't have dawned on us because we were truly unplugged. And who gets to do that? Who has the privilege or the blessing to say, for the next 6 weeks, I'm just going away. We're just unplugging from the world and all these things that we talk about. Talk about a detox. Boy, that was the detox of the best kind.
I'm thinking about the fact that you did come back. Was there any point in your journey when you at least wondered, what would happen if you did not come back?
Oh my goodness. Gee.
No, not for me. I had never considered that.
No, I can tell you sadness set in when we were getting towards the end, because as much as people think 500 miles, 15 miles a day, and the physical side of it, and it it's hard. I think Allie and I have agreed about 2 weeks into the journey, your legs finally get the message. Okay, you're going to keep walking every day. So they stop fighting you. But then the mental stuff kicks in, and that's the emotions. And I think, as we mentioned in the book or in other forums where, people died during that journey.
Yeah.
3 people that we know of. So you're going through this roller coaster ride of all this stuff, but you get into such a harmony, I guess, of every day. Eat, sleep, walk, in between your meeting with people, and you're enjoying the silence. And then we started getting towards the end, and it was sad because you knew it had to be over, but you didn't necessarily want it to be over because you wanted to just hang on to that magic for a little while longer.
In the midst of all that, and at some point this has got to be connected to, I don't know, spirituality, at least, if not faith in God or a higher being or something, which I'll come to in a minute. But when you were aware of the fact that people on the pilgrimage lost their lives, did the greater perspective in which you were seeing life make that any easier to accept passing as part of life? I mean, we in the West are not terribly good about that. And I think Eastern people generally are more attuned to that. Did that ever cross your mind,
Allie?
I think hearing that somebody on the Camino has died when you're on the Camino is an entirely different perspective to hearing someone has died on the Camino when you're at home.
Well put.
Because you're experiencing it in the moment and you understand the geography and you understand the community, and it is probably easier to handle, I would say, because for many reasons. But there is this fantastic sense of community that it's hard to put into words that I don't believe we see in our everyday lives.
Yeah. And even as I was asking the question, I was contemplating the other side of it, which is and the only word that comes to mind is kinship.
Yes.
You must establish a kind of kinship that does not exist anywhere else in your life. So to lose someone along the way, that's part of that kinship must be difficult.
Difficult, but in a lot of ways easier, because you are surrounded by this community and everybody is very supportive. So there are many ways in which it's slightly easier to handle.
If I can just jump in on that community, we call it camaraderie, Mark, and this extends to the people that passed on. Picture all this melting pot of all these various cultures and people coming together. Some don't even speak the language, and whatever their background is, that's all gone. You are just suddenly all in it together. You all know what you're doing. You all know where you're heading eventually. You know you're going to have challenges, but you just have to stop. And this happened to us. Stop for a minute off to the side of the trail. And as much as we were alone, very often, as we said in the book, people would pass by. And people coming by, they don't just walk by not wanting to get involved. They want to know, are you okay? Do you need anything? We might be just adjusting our shoes, but that's that sudden sense of I care about you, you care about me, and anything resembling that thing that happens in our world today where I just don't want to get involved or I don't want to approach those people. All that's gone. You just care about your fellow human being. It was wow. It's wow.
I may have just connected some dots that I hadn't thought about before. Do you think that in our, I guess I'm going to call it our normal lives, do you think that the reason that we don't pay as much attention to what Dickens referred to in A Christmas Carol as fellow passengers to the grave, do you think we don't pay as much attention because of the distractions we abide?
Oh boy. Yes. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but think about it. We stripped away everything when we took our first step on that trail, stripped bare down to just yourself. And then as you go on, all the Post-it notes in my brain start to disappear. And a similar experience for Allie, things that you're carrying with you, because as they say, it ain't what you bring to the Camino, it's what you leave behind. But when you take away all that level of noise, what replaces is that camaraderie, that community, that awareness of the people behind you. The reverse of that, of course, in the world we live in today, where you got so many either reasons, excuses, distractions, or noise to kind of justify just kind of getting on with your own life, or I don't want to get involved, whatever that is.
And the common one would be, I haven't got time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that. I haven't got time.
Yeah. And actually, Allie, I think I wasn't specific enough, but that's what I was thinking of. And I think, and I would like to know what you think, but I think part of the reason, or at least one of the reasons that we're so willing to say, I haven't got time, is that there's something going on here.
Yeah.
It's fear of missing out, Dennis. Well, but I got to check my messages. What if somebody's trying to get a hold of me? I mean, if you're in a place where no one can get a hold of you, wow, I never thought of this. Is there comfort or safety in that?
Well, comes with, you got trust has to come with it, kind of trusting in the kindness of others. Maybe you forgot about that, and trusting in the simplicity and realizing you need less than you think, and kind of getting comfortable with all that, Mark, again.
And it does take a little bit of time to get you. We are so used to being attached to our devices. Every minute of every day, we're looking, we're checking. And so it does take a couple of days to get used to the fact that you're not, every time you sit down somewhere, you've stopped for a coffee, you're not getting your phone out, looking at your emails and seeing if anybody's written to you and does someone need a response. It's like detoxing.
Yeah. You know, Allie, I thought when you started to say that, when you said attached to, I actually thought you were going to say attacked by. because it's hard not to feel that sometimes.
Yeah.
Ann knows at the end of the day, I'm on a second floor. If I'm headed down the stairs and there's French doors at the bottom of the stairs and you have to go through a breezeway to get to the main part of the house, if I'm walking down the stairs and I hear the sound of my instant message thing go off when I'm thinking I'm done for the day, she can probably hear me swearing somewhere because I just want to be done. I thought I was done. So it does feel like attacked by. We're going to have to take a break in a minute or two, but I'm going to ask this question, and if we have to pick it up again on the other side of the break, we will. There are many, many things that make me say, how could you be aware of this and not believe in God? And believe it or not, I experienced one of those just this morning, because it doesn't matter how I came onto it, but there's a Pink Floyd song called On the Turning Away. And they did a concert video in 1987 with a live version of that song. It's impossible for me to listen to that song and not think, there's got to be a God. I mean, this wouldn't have happened. Was there that on the Camino?
I think there's a really popular phrase that anybody who's walked the Camino will know and understand, and it is the Camino provides. And that means many things to many people, but within everybody's belief system, I think that means there is a higher being somewhere that is providing these things when you most need them.
Yeah, wow. So I think that's something that we're not terribly mindful of in our day-to-day lives.
Yes.
Because I absolutely believe that's true. And I may have said, and we will take the break right as soon as I say this, but I have recognized that I only pray when I'm grateful, because whatever it is has been provided. And I didn't even need to ask for it. Okay, so we will take our first break right now. We'll be back in 3 minutes, and Dizzy will take care of our cameras. See you on the other side.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Sorry, I was saying I only made scant notes for myself before the show, aside from doing the job on your book that I did. And I started by writing universal truths. And then the next thing that occurred to me was undercurrents. And then the last thing I wrote was, I believe it's Carl Jung's notion of the collective unconscious.
Mm.
And I found a couple of things in the book that reminded me of this, and I would just like to ask you about them. So on page 47, you wrote about being invited into the home of a Spanish woman who said to you, you wrote, sorry. Well, she said, my family's been offering hospitality for generations. And you said, in that moment, we understood that her gesture was more than just a kind act. It was a sacred tradition, a connection to something far deeper than human kindness. And that reminded me of something that the French existentialist Albert Camus wrote, which is, if there is a sin against life, it consists perhaps not so much in despairing of life as in hoping for another life and in eluding the implacable grandeur of this life. That's what I thought of when I read about that experience with that woman. Is there, and this actually seems like an unnecessary question, but is there something about being on the Camino that makes you feel more grounded in this life?
Duh. Gee.
And if you're going to tell me, by the way, if you're going to tell me that was a good question, after the show, I'm going to run downstairs and tell Ann that I get extra points. Because if she tells me, oh, that's a good question or that's a good idea, I get points.
Or let me say this about that. I'll take a crack at that. That's a tough one, Mark, or maybe it isn't. It's probably right in front of me. But it seems like every step in that Camino was like a lesson or a revelation, or probably the best word is a gift. Grounded literally, with our feet hitting that sacred trail every single day, and just such, simplicity in everything we did, and kind of a raised awareness of what's going on. And then you mentioned the hospitality of that lady, but there's a presumed welcome each step of the way. We just presume, particularly the locals who've been supporting that trail for, over 500 years, you're just welcome. And we know we would be welcome, and we know they would open a door. Where do you find that? And there's no sense of danger or foreboding. It's just, I know if I need something, it's going to be there. I don't know if that's grounding or not, but wow. Nice to see it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think it's incredible to just consider, as you're walking, the thousands of other footsteps that have been on that trail, ahead of us, behind us, just hundreds and hundreds of years, people have been doing the same thing. And it is an incredible notion as you walk to think of all those that have come before you and all the millions of reasons that have compelled them to do it.
And likewise, Allie, I was thinking that for people like that Spanish woman, that's it feels superficial or inadequate to call it a tradition, but that's a generational part of their lives for them. I mean, I honestly, before right now, I had never thought about that part of it, but to be able to witness the pilgrimage of so many people and to have that be I was going to say necessary, that it's not necessary, but to have that be a part of your existence, to know that year after year, people on that pilgrimage are going to be stopping by.
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. Do you get the sense that those folks are conscious of that?
yes, I do. And actually, on the first day when you you start from France and you're climbing up the Pyrenees, there was a very small house, and those people, and you're still in France at that point, you haven't crossed into Spain at the top of the mountain. Those people have been welcoming pilgrims for a long time, and they've got a table outside, they're offering snacks, they're offering drinks. And I was struck at the time at the two young children I spoke to them with my basic high school French that I still remembered. And they were 9 and 11, and they were the youngest generation, and they were outside at that table, welcoming the pilgrims, pouring them drinks, giving them snacks. And so people are continuing with the tradition, even though if you look at the average 9 and 11-year-old today, they've got their face in an iPad and, goodness knows what they're doing. But
and if I can add to that, Mark, they weren't the kind of kids that you could tell they were doing because mom said they had to. They wanted to do it. They were enjoying themselves.
Here are some more dots that I never connected before. For a couple of years, I participated in something called the Bike MS Cape Cod Getaway. And it's a bike event, and you ride 100 miles on Saturday and 100 miles on Sunday and end up in Provincetown. But what boggled my mind was the route is completely lined with people with canes and walkers and wheelchairs and people who are suffering from MS, and they're out there just cheering on the riders absolutely gratefully. And I thought, what kind of miracle is this that I'm being heralded in this way simply because I have the accident of strong legs and good lungs? And it was just amazing. And I think especially those young children already fully appreciate what you were just describing. Amazing. I want to share with you the other quote that reminded me of something. Have you, either or both of you, read The Little Prince?
No.
Okay, so The Little Prince, I believe it was published in 1948 by a Frenchman who was a pilot, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Anyway, you wrote, Dennis, on page 77, the true journey happens not on the road, but in the heart. And in The Little Prince, he wrote, it is only with the heart that one can see rightly what is essential is invisible to the eye. And I thought,
wow.
I didn't, especially now that you told me that you haven't read The Little Prince, I was thinking, even when I read what you wrote, this is not an accident. It's not accidental that sentiment is at least shared, if not universal. Were there other kinds of realizations like that along the way when you recognized ways in which we're all connected that you may not have thought about before? And more specifically, how did you communicate with people whose languages you didn't speak?
The first two words were always "Buen Camino."
Hmm.
You greeted them with that, and you left them with that. Oh boy, I'm thinking about, Allie, that gentleman named Steve. Remember
Yes.
Steve?
Yeah.
When you talk about connected, Mark, I'm not going to do this story justice, so I'll let Allie kick in here. But let's just say, we were determined to just do this together. Again, not in a group. We didn't walk with anybody. We passed through groups. We caught up with groups. We could have easily joined a group, because you're either going to see them during the day or you'll see them at night. And very often in the evening, you'll catch up with people you saw during the day. And so, you have a normal bit of camaraderie going on. But we were walking one day, and I forget when this was exactly, and we're in the middle of woods, walking along. And all of a sudden, this guy comes up behind us and out of nowhere. And he was so glad to see us. His name was Steve. He's from Texas, right? Right,
Mhm.
South Texas. And he
Wow.
was so glad to see us because he thought he was lost. And apparently that wasn't the first time he got lost. And do you mind if I walk with you? Now, that was a turning point for us because we wanted to walk it alone, but his approach, and from that point forward, is amazing. And Allie, I'll turn it over to you to talk about some of the unusual connections.
It's just, it's a moment in time. And so we were sitting, I think, in the woods, and when Steve came along, there were no other walkers because they had all we followed the signs. Everybody else took a shorter route along the road. So we were going on the slightly longer route through and this Steve had done the same thing, and he was concerned that he was lost. So yes, of course he could walk with us, and we did. But he, as it turned out, he had an awful lot of things in common with Dennis. They both served in the Air Force. They both served in the same places in a very similar period of time. He suggested to Dennis that had he ever considered doing any radio or voiceover work because he had the voice for it. Having never met him, he didn't know Dennis had done that training. And it's just that there were so many things with this guy, and we ended up spending all day with him. And then actually when we got to where we were going that evening, he came back and we met him for dinner. But these are the random things that happen that are maybe not so random.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, Dennis hears me say this all the time. I do not.
I agree. There are no coincidences.
Yeah.
But to come back to your question about different languages, there was I believe they were a Japanese couple walking, and they spoke no English. We don't speak Japanese. But we managed to communicate with them on most days. We would see them. We don't know where they were ending up each day, but we would just see them on the trail every day, and we would manage to communicate. How are you? How's it going? How are your feet? And all those sorts of things. And it's just interesting how you manage to get over the language barrier.
So I'm trying to imagine that gestures and things
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
Yep. Gestures, facial expressions. There's a lot to be said for body language and facial expressions. And we made it work. And many, many people do. There are stories out there from the Camino that people become really, really very close friends, and they haven't got a single word of language in common. But they walk weeks together and they become very good friends.
Wow. If I'm reading my clock correctly, I can't believe that we actually have to take another break already. Somehow that just doesn't seem possible, but I think we do. And when we
Okay.
come back from this one, I would just like to point out some things that I found, some passages in the book, in different places in the book, that I found related to each other.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
would just like to hear your thoughts on those. So once
Sure.
again, we will take our second break right here, and we will be back in 3 minutes.
Ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality,
Where potentiality meets reality.
where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brand's distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Sorry, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. I actually didn't realize before the break, the first things I want to connect are actually 3. On page 69, you wrote, I realized our journey was teaching us something profound about patience. And this is the part I underlined. The art of moving forward without constantly demanding arrival. I absolutely love that. And then on page 79, I'm realizing it's about the continuous act of arriving. Each step is an arrival. Each moment is a destination. And then on the very next page, page 80, you wrote, some people walk thousands of kilometers and never truly arrive. Others walk 100 meters and find everything they're seeking.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that a little? That is just a beautiful realization.
I'll give it a crack, and then I'm sure Ali will weigh in on this one. But there are people on the Camino that it's important in them to get to the end. There's people on a Camino where the journey is what you're there for, not getting to the end. But, everybody has their timetables, but we didn't. I mean, the journey, it was all about the journey, not the destination. There's no greater joy than seeing that final city that you're walking into. Don't get me wrong, but it's the journey, and it's just slowing down to see the true world around you and all those arrivals you're talking about, Mark. And that's just an approach, I guess, because a lot of people thinking out, it's just a hike. It's just 500 miles. It's when you get into it and you start realizing, wait a minute, there's something deeper. There's something more to it. And now that's our experience. Maybe some people just it's a marathon worth completing, and I got to be done by this day, because we did experience people that, I mean, they just leaped ahead of us. Where I said, we see the same people at night. We did sometimes, but as Steve was a good example, he was just flying after we met him. So
I love the idea of just 500 miles. Just 500 miles. It reminds me, and I'm sorry for this tangent, it reminds me, I was in a gym one day, and some guy on a bench next to me had a seizure. And he fell off the bench, and he was turning blue, and he was foaming at the mouth. And somebody who had some medical experience came running over and said, "Oh, no, this is just a minor seizure." And I'm like, no. This is a seizure. Maybe there's a scale, but I don't get that. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Ali?
Well, and your story actually is a good one too. It's all a matter of perspective. So all of our perspectives are different. When we're walking on the Camino, and actually we touched on the fact that we did a shorter Camino several years ago, and that experience was different. So a lot of it depends on where you're starting from, not geographically, but in yourself. And it's also so easy on a daily basis in our lives to not pay any attention to slowing down and considering the journey and considering the steps that are getting you to where you're going, because you have to get there, and you have to get there yesterday, and everything is so quick and you're in such a hurry. That just doesn't work on the Camino. The Camino, I touched on the Camino provides. The Camino has a way of making you stop and slow down and listen. And so that's why you're taking these slower steps, and you're paying attention to what you're doing, and you're forced to slow down. And that's one of the things that we were quite determined to bring back with us, is this notion of considering everything and slowing down a little bit. And it's not essential for us to do everything at warp speed.
It also occurs to me, and when I was first reading those passages, it made me think of a book I have written by a psychotherapist named Sheldon Kopp. And the title of the book is "If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him." And the whole idea is, and it seems to me, the way I was going to express it was, the Camino doesn't even make it possible to hide from yourself. And if you're not prepared to, I don't know how to put this one, to greet yourself, to be comfortable, or to find peace with yourself, that thing must be grueling.
Yeah, wow.
There are stories of people who've gone off to walk their Camino, and they have struggled, and they've considered stopping and turning back. But we're back to the Camino provides, and every case. Of course, I don't know every case because there are so many, but there are many examples of people who have found the person they needed to find at the point they needed to find them, or the purpose, or something they didn't know they were looking for.
But to your point, Mark, there's the folks that we all know that if you stop the music and take away all that noise, you've got to face the music.
Mm.
Ooh.
And that could be scary for some people, but boy, I can't think of a better place to do it than there, because you're going to be surrounded and lifted up by all these people that you never knew existed. And they're all in it together, and they kind of know intuitively that you're struggling, and you could just use a helping hand or a hug or something.
And well, the first thing that occurred to me was, and this is not intended to be a pun or anything, but the Camino then is a two-way street. You have to be as prepared for it and prepared to meet yourself as you do to walk the thing. And Dennis, in reaction to the what you were just saying, I would imagine there's something about being in the company of those quote unquote strangers. And I'm highly mindful that you used the word community earlier, Allie.
Mm-hmm.
But there must be something comforting about that, because if there is any judgment involved at all, it must be completely different because they don't know you.
Yes, and you're likely that you'll never see them again.
Yeah.
You're
So
right.
any kind of preconception is not even part of the picture.
That's a very good point, Mark. Very good point.
You know what? And it also helps me understand why I continued to feel more peaceful as I was reading the book.
How about that?
Because as I was reading about your challenges and the challenges of others, I was thinking, well, what in the world do I have to worry about? I want to connect two other things. And this was just so incredibly beautiful in my humble estimation. You wrote about the Cruz de Ferro. And on page 109, you said, we each took out the small stones we had carried from home. And even I'm not dumb enough to miss the symbolic significance in that. These stones represented burdens we wished to leave behind, aspects of ourselves we hoped to transform through our pilgrimage. And on the very next page, 110, you wrote, the burden I had symbolically left behind at the cross, a long-held fear of inadequacy, didn't simply disappear. Instead, I found myself viewing it from a new perspective. The act of acknowledging and releasing it had created space, for a more compassionate self-understanding.
Amen.
Well, yeah, amen. You wrote that. That is just such a beautiful thing. And it speaks to me to the necessary self-awareness, not only that the Camino imparts, but that you have to be ready.
I agree. Yeah.
To accept. I don't know, this feels silly, but I'm really, really tempted to ask you, what did that feel like? Aside from what I would imagine to be a feeling of peacefulness. And even though you were leaving something there, whether tangible or symbolic.
Well,
did you feel lighter somehow?
Absolutely. It was exhaling. It was like suddenly exhaling. After all this time, I can exhale. And, there's that quote that I use a lot because I just love it. It's the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. That's what happened there. That's that exhale, Mark. And it changed me. And my goodness. And some people have said that to me, whether it be on some online forums that you're involved in. Well, something's different here. You're more open. You're more spontaneous. You're opening your kimono farther than I've ever seen. And that's absolutely what I was doing. because I was determined not to lose what came from that exhaling. And not to always step aside and give everybody else the microphone, but to take the microphone myself once in a while.
On page 141, I highlighted 2 words, and I stopped because I thought, hold on, these 2 words, they don't make any sense together. But the words were calloused resilience. Can you just talk about that a little bit? Because that too is just a beautiful awareness, and it suggests to me that we can become shaped by our difficult experiences, but we don't have to be hardened by them. And whether we're going to be hardened by them is a choice.
I agree. And I'm going to go back to what we started with when we opened this conversation, Mark. These are the kind of things that you just never would have dawned on either one of us had we not had that silence, because you don't go that deep looking in a mirror, but it's like you're walking every day with a mirror in front of you. And you've got to look at it and say, what do I see? There's that quote that you probably saw in the book, the Camino leads you back to yourself. The best analogy I can use is it's that old rocking chair you might see in your grandmother's house. And it's been there forever and probably handed down through generations. And there's probably, 30 layers of varnish on it. And the Camino allowed us to keep scraping off that varnish until you got back to what was there in the first place. So again, another part of the book we talked about, the Camino is about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so you can become who you were in the first place. That's what got us there. And that gave us the strength, I think, using the word resilient, to just bounce back from there, but not bounce away from there, bounce back from there and grab it and realize that was a gift. We were just given, it was a revelation. It was a gift. Grab a hold of it and take it with you. And if you can do it, share it with others.
And I think the experience of the Camino after you've got into the first week or two, the Camino gives you permission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I love that idea.
And so all the things that you perhaps wouldn't do because you may not be brave enough, or you don't want to take the time to really dig deep when you're involved in your normal busy life, when you're on the Camino allows you the permission to do that.
I'm sincerely not wanting to believe this clock that's sitting here, which tells me it's 7. But I want to mention one other thing, and then I want to give you a minute to tell people how to find you. On page 166, you wrote, "The transition back to our pre-Camino lives loomed before us, a challenge perhaps as daunting as any we had faced on the pilgrim path." And the note that I wrote to myself there just says, "the doing." Was coming back any easier because you understood and appreciated what you had done?
Yes, I for myself, and I think Dennis would agree, it was a big experience is how I would describe it. And you don't get to the end and then think to yourself, wow, I'll change this and I'll change that. These things are happening during the walk. You are transitioning as the walk happens.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it isn't so much I get on the plane and on the journey over, I'm going to decide how I change everything. You've been doing that the whole time.
And maybe you didn't realize it, but you do when you step off. And that goes back to the Camino begins when you finish it, and the purpose of the book, and making sure we don't lose what we gained. Because it's so easy to fall back into the old patterns.
And I'm simply going to apologize because we're out of time, and I wish we weren't. We may, in fact, pick this up again, but I do want to share this book, Rites of Passage, our Camino pilgrimage. which is available on Amazon. I encourage folks to look it up. And I know you can easily be found at BizCatalyst 360. Is there any place else that folks should look for you?
No, that's it, Mark. BizCatalyst360.com, and everything we do and everything we are is under that banner.
Okay. I thank you both. I apologize that we've come to the end. And I really do hope that you'll be willing to come back. And again, thank you for being here. As for everybody who was good enough to tune in, I will be back 2 weeks from today, and I will see you then.
Thanks,
you.
Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks to both of you.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.